Please welcome Alvy on the podium, if that considered podium.
Thanks, Spiro. Because of AV weirdness, I'm going to speak over there, but you can watch the show up here. I just want you to see what I look like before I go bury myself behind the cable. Okay. So I'm going to give a quick tour through the history of the Pixel, starting from the very first Pixels up to the latest, more or less. And the idea is, I hear there are a bunch of people interested in entrepreneurship here. Our story, the group, so this is basically the story of the group now known as Pixar, which I guess is now known as Disney. It's a very unusual entrepreneurship story, as you'll see. But let's get started. And by the way, once I finish the slides and the videos, I'm going to come back up here, and I hope you have some great questions for me. Okay? Okay. A couple of years ago, well, like Spiro said, I'm writing this book called A Biography of the Pixel, which is to explain to the world what pixels are, because most people don't know. It's non-mathematical, intuitive, and has lots of great stories in it. So I've had to do research, and basically I found out that everything I thought I knew was wrong, and therefore I have to spend a year for each chapter getting the research done first. So one of the chapters is about computation, what it is, and the next chapter was the history of computers, which turns out to be one of the most contentious things on Earth. Everybody claims it, every country claims it, but I believe I found the very first computer, and by that I mean a programmable computer. Okay? And you're looking at it on the screen there. And believe it or not, it's called Baby. It was built in 1947 at the University of Manchester in England. And when I went to see it, this is what's on the screen. Well, they set it up for me. And not only did it say Pixar, but the word Pixar was scrolling across the screen, which blew my mind, because what you're looking at are pixels, which means there were pixels on the very first computer, and the very first computer could animate. Who knew? Now, these are the actual first pixels on Baby. 32 by 32 bits. These were the actual, this is the actual memory of the first computer. They actually stored the bits as dots on the face of a CRT. They figured out a way to read and write dots off the face of a CRT. So those are the very first pixels, 1947, 48. This is the first video game that I found, also at the University of Manchester. It's checkers, or drafts. The second video game was at Cambridge, tic-tac-toe, or noughts and crosses. And that brings me to probably the most important message I have of the whole talk, and that is, we've been writing this amazing revolution defined by the Moore's Law curve my entire professional career, and we're still writing it. I can't overemphasize this. You'll see the first computers off the left of the screen, 1948, then there's this gap of 15 or 17 years. In 1965, Gordon Moore announced what we now call Moore's Law, which basically says, well, the way he put it was, transistors on an integrated circuit chip double in density every 18 months. That's not intuitive. So I've turned it into the expression you see at the top left. That's mathematically equivalent to saying anything good about computers gets better by a factor of 10 every 5 years. Now, the reason that's a better wording is because a factor of 10, we call it an order of magnitude for a reason. It's not just a bigger number. You have to change the way you think every time you advance an order of magnitude. The revolutionary aspect of Moore's Law is there is a revolution every 5 years in the way you have to think. And it's been happening since 1965. So if you take 1965 as Moore's Law factor of 1, by the way, I made my first computer graphic in that year in New Mexico. It is now at 10 billion, and it's going up to at least 1 trillion X by 2025. Intel just recently, or IBM just recently announced that they're right on it to hit that curve at 2018. So I don't think I'm too far off by predicting that we will be there by 2025. 1 trillion times more powerful than computers were in 1965 when I started. You can't imagine it. That's beyond human capability to imagine. The only way, and you can't predict it either. Each order of magnitude is impossible to predict. Well, I shouldn't say impossible. If you can do it, you'll probably make $1 billion. So there's a challenge. What can you do with the next 1,000x of Moore's Law that is coming right down the pike? Now, I'm going to ride this curve using the group now known as Pixar as data points. And you can just see Moore's Law at work. So let's start at Xerox PARC. Down in the lower left corner, you see the 10x. This means 5 years after Moore's Law began. And in the lower right corner, the date ranges approximately. So what you're looking at here are the first color pixels in the world. My friend Dick Schaup built the first color machine. It had the first color memory. It was 8 bits per pixel, and the resolution was old-fashioned video, roughly 500 by 500 pixels. And speaking of Dick Schaup, we lost him last week, and I just wanted to say R.I.P. Dick. He was one of my best friends in the world. Little doff of the hat to a guy who brought us the first color pixels. And you'll see the HSB transform at the top. That was my first software contribution to his machine, which was called SuperPaint. And I was hired there not to do software or hardware, but to make art. And so I have some pretty awful art to show you. And I'll go through this really fast, so it won't hurt you too long, okay? But this came off. These are the first 8-bit pixels in the world. Whoops, sorry. Go back. You'll see why I'm skipping fast. All right, I won't make you suffer anymore. But that was the first digital video right there you just watched. It's called VidBits. And I'm horror-struck by it now, but it was my entry into the video art world of New York City when I moved there after graduating from Stanford as a professor at NYU for a while. All right, so that was first turn of Moore's Law, first 5 years. Let's leap forward another 5 years. The factor is now 100x. And we're at a place called the New York Institute of Technology out on Long Island. This was an astonishing place and one of the under-celebrated parts of the computer graphics story. There was it was owned by a very wealthy man, the first of our 3 rich patrons along the way. The first was this man, Alexander Schur. Nobody's heard of him. And everybody's heard of our second 2 patrons, George Lucas and Steve Jobs. The second 2 became billionaires off of us. This guy lost everything, including his school. His sons eventually took it away from him for spending money on us. But he really had the idea. He was just too soon. So in the upper right, you'll notice what he had done was put together 4 estates out on the North Shore of Long Island. This is the Great Gatsby part of Long Island. Very wealthy people, gigantic estates. He put together 4 estates, and the mansions, which you see in these slides, were the buildings at his school. So in the lower right corner, for example, is Dee Seversky Mansion. That was where we did video. And upper left was Holloway House. A bunch of us lived there. Upper right is the Gehry House, and that was where we did computer graphics. In fact, we did it in the converted garage of that mansion. So our joke is, yeah, we got started in a garage. It just happened to be a 4-car garage. A lot of amazing things happened here. This is where I met. I failed to mention that Xerox PARC decided not to do color. One of the strangest things along the way was they fired me. And I went in to find out why, and they said, well, we've decided not to do color. And I said, but you have the future's color, and you own it completely, which they did. And they said, that may be, but it's a corporate decision to go black and white. Okay, bye. And so I went here. And this guy gave us the best computer graphics laboratory in the world at the time. He bought us everything we wanted. He didn't tell us where the money came from, but he just gave us what we wanted. So for example, one day he came, he's a very strange man. One day he came to me and he said, I'll back that up. What do we need in order to stay ahead? Oh, when I got fired from Xerox, I lost access to the first color memory, right? I needed the second one. He bought the second one. That's why I was there. And I said, at $80,000, by the way, for 8 bits by 500 by 500. So I said, if you buy 2 more of these 8-bit memories, I can gang them together and we'll have 24-bit pixels. RGB, full color, 16 million colors possible. I didn't know whether he got it or not. He came back a few weeks later, he says, you know, I bought you 5 more of those things, those 8-bit things. Now you have 2 of those RGB thingies you were talking about. In today's money, he just said, I spent $2 million on your say-so. And it put us out onto the absolute screaming edge of graphics. Everything we touched, nobody had ever done it before. I wrote the first full-color paint program. Everything we touched was new. At the same time, and by the way, this is where I met Ed Catmull, who would be the guy who co-founded Pixar with me later. Okay, so this is where we started. The group now known as Pixar started in that garage. Also on that guy's campus, by the way, we weren't part of the school, we were just on the campus. Personal projects, okay. Another personal project on the campus was an old-fashioned cell animation team, a la Disney, making a movie called Tubby the Tuba, the old-fashioned way. Ink and paint on celluloid, tedious, filming 1 frame at a time, drawing 1 frame at a time, all that. Uncle Alex is what we called our patron, Alex Schur. Uncle Alex kind of had this crazy idea that somehow he could hook the computer to this system and I think just print dollar bills was his entrepreneurial instinct. Fire all the people is the way we put it. We went, no, 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 don't say that. It's not true. We can do the grunt work, but we can't do art. By the way, we still can't do the art. Nobody knows how to do it. But the important thing is we had a team of experts, over 100 experts, that taught us how animation works. The nuts and bolts, every step of the process. And we got the idea right then. So this is the mid-70s on Long Island. We got the idea that, hey, why don't we be the first people in the world to make a completely digital movie? And that's when we had the idea. We didn't know it was going to take 20 years to execute, but it did. With a lot of fun and also troubles along the way, and I'm going to tell you some of those. We were all artists of some ilk or another. So once we had that 24-bit frame buffer, we started cranking out art as fast as we could. So there's just some examples. The bottom 6 are all mine. The top 6 are by several of my colleagues. And we also made videos. So brace yourself for yet another masterpiece. Okay, Lance Williams, I'm going to name this. Jim Blinn, for those of you who know the history, more Jim Blinn. This is the world's shortest animation with the longest credits. That's all credits, still credits. Here comes the animation, here it is. And that's it. More credits. Ed Catmull, Christy Barton, myself, and I won't make you suffer anymore. But that's sort of, we were doing animation way, way, way back then. This is mid-70s. Then another important thing happened. By the way, Ed and I invented the alpha channel out here on this, for those of you who know what that is. One day this guy, Ed Ibschwiller, showed up. It turned out to be the most important artistic collaboration of my life. He was a well-known artist already. He was an abstract oil painter first in his youth in Paris, and then he discovered 16mm filmmaking, and then he discovered video art, and then he discovered video discs, and then he showed up at our place. He discovered computer graphics. And he walked in and he said, well, I've got a Guggenheim Fellowship and I'm going to make a movie with you guys in the next 6 months if you let me. And we burst out laughing. And he said, well, what are you laughing about? We said, well, you'd be lucky in 6 months to turn out 3 minutes. I mean, this is really the early days. But that's what we did. He and I worked together. That's me with the dark hair, by the way, over there. And that's Ed next to me. He was like a father figure to me. And we had a wonderful collaboration. Both, he could talk tech and I could talk art, and we just melded. Beautiful way. And we made a piece called Sunstone. One frame is at the right. And I'm going to show you a little bit of this. It's in the museum. It's in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, and I'm still quite proud of it. But I'm not going to make you sit through the whole thing. Oops. Well, somehow I lost the animation. Just a second. There we go. This little piece of 3D anti-aliased graphics took 54 hours to compute. At video resolution. All right, enough of that. All right, let's leap another 5 years ahead, another order of magnitude. Now we're at Lucasfilm. We finally realized that the rich man on Long Island didn't have it. His movie Tubby the Tuba sucked. It was really bad. It had everything wrong with it that an animated movie can have. Luckily, we were not part of it, so we did not get tarred with it. We did learn that the guy was not going to be the man that took us into the future of movies, though. He just didn't have it. About then, George Lucas called. Actually, Francis Coppola called on one day, and George Lucas called on the next day. I don't mean themselves, their people called. And we didn't trust the guy from Coppola, so we blew that off, but we jumped and went to Marin County in California to be with George Lucas, because he did know how to make movies. Star Wars had just come out, and we had been blown away by it. Now, I should add one more thing. We always thought it'd be Disney. Kind of were shocked when this guy George Lucas showed up, because Ed and I would go out to Disney every year, and we did this for over a decade. We'd take a secret mission to Disney every year to say, are you guys ready yet? And they would always have some cockamamie reason why they weren't ready yet. One year it was, can you do bubbles? No, we can't do, okay, come back when you can do bubbles. That kind of thing. But we made friends with all the technical people there, which in the long run paid off handsomely. But they never did step up to the bat until much later. This is my graphics group. I was head of computer graphics at Lucasfilm. That's me holding the shutter of the camera. On my right, oh, there's names here. On my right is Ed Catmull, who would be my longtime partner. On my left is this new kid I just hired named John Lasseter, who was our secret weapon. He was an honest-to-God animator. And basically everybody there got an Academy Award for something or other. Then we got our big break. One thing I noticed was George Lucas. I was putting together this world-class team, and George Lucas never came and asked us to be in his movies. And finally it dawned on me, I said, oh my gosh, he doesn't get it. He thinks we're a bunch of technoids that know how to build hardware and software but don't care or are not capable of making content. But of course, we were all about content. I was already in the Museum of Modern Art. We wanted to be part of the movies. That's why I put this team together, okay? So George wasn't getting it. At that time, Paramount Pictures showed up to do special effects for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Not Star Wars, but Star Trek. And they wanted some of this newfangled computer graphics in their piece. And the guys at ILM, which is Industrial Light and Magic, the special effects house of Lucasfilm, said, oh, we don't do that, but I think the guys next door, that being us, they do that, we think. So they called me over and they proposed this. It was a really lame idea for a shot in a movie, and I finally said, do you guys know what we can do with computers in this day? And they went, no. And I said, well, let me go home tonight and draw up a storyboard that will satisfy the needs of your shot. and the narrative sense of the film, and I'll come back tomorrow and present it. And they went, okay. And I walked out of that room about this high off the ground because I had just been given the big break, right? And I knew it. I had just been asked to design a shot in a major motion picture using our technology. So needless to say, I was up all night, excited beyond belief, trying to figure out what it is. Oh, and I said one more thing. I said, as I left the room, I said, you know, we can't do movie resolution yet. Computers are still too slow. We can only do video. And they said, that's okay. We're going to be showing, this is going to be a video demo to Admiral Kirk. I said, fine. Great, we can do that. So that was how Star Trek, the Genesis demo came into being. I brought my team together and I said, this is a shot, this is our break. We're going to make Paramount happy. We're going to make people in the theater audience happy. But what this really is a 60-second commercial to George Lucas that will blow his socks off. He'll know what he's got here finally. And I knew George well enough to know that he never takes his eyes off the camera in a movie. It's really hard to do. You should try it sometime. Basically, the director has failed if you contract a camera. You're supposed to be sucked into the emotion of the story, right? George never got sucked into the emotion of the story. He followed the camera. So we put a camera move in here that was so he would know that no real camera could possibly make this shot. It wouldn't be gratuitous computer graphics 101. It would make narrative sense in the movie, but George would know what he saw. And sure enough, so these are shots out of that Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And sure enough, well, let me just show you a little piece of that.
It is our intention to introduce the Genesis device into a pre-selected area of a lifeless space body, a moon or other dead form, causing what we call the Genesis effect.
I'm going to pause this just for a minute because there's something that happens in here that you'll spot, but if I don't say it in advance, you won't. Okay. We used in this shot the notion of fractals. First time fractals had been used in, well, practically anywhere for anything. Fractals have a bit of randomness built into the very nature of the algorithm. So we were growing mountains of random height on this planet with a spaceship traveling around it, as you'll soon see. And there was one frame where a spacecraft ran into the mountains. So our fractal guy, Lauren Carpenter, went back into the database and by hand carved a notch in the mountain for that one frame. All right. Okay.
Matter is reorganized with life-generating results.
See it?
Capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it. The reformed moon simulated here represents the merest fraction.
All right, we're skipping right along. Then I hired John Lasseter and made a piece called Andre and Walibi. It was our announcement to the world that we could do character animation. I thought I was going to do it myself. I thought I was a good enough animator I could do it. Boy, was I wrong. I don't have that magic skill that animators have. But John Lasseter has it. And he said, do you mind if I make a few? I said, yeah, please give me some advice. And that's what happened. Again, we're clipping through here pretty fast. All right, I'm going to cut through that. Okay, so still at Lucasfilm, and Disney came to us finally and said, we would like for you guys to digitize our cell animation process, which we had been offering that we could do for over a decade. And we did that with them, and this is how we bonded with the Disney company. And they started making movies with it. And after a certain point, I think it was Little Mermaid, no, Rescuers Down Under, every single movie they made used our digital system. And it was a beautiful, both companies loved each other because we outperformed the contract that we had written. And then a Japanese company came to us and said, why don't you guys, we'd like to make the first completely computer-generated movie in the world. Would you help us make it? It's going to be about the character Monkey. Those of you who come from Asian countries may know Monkey. So we got into it. John started drawing character studies. We started having story treatments written, marketing treatments written. Remember, this is all at Lucasfilm still. And then it came the day when I had to price it out, and I sat down and ran the numbers and went, oh my gosh, Moore's Law is still not there yet. We have to back out. We need one order of magnitude more. In other words, we need 5 more years. And about that same time, George and Marcia Lucas divorced. He lost half his fortune. He couldn't support us anymore. And this is the point where the entrepreneurship started. I went to my partner, Ed, and I said, you know, Ed, George just lost half his fortune. He never knew what to do with us anyhow. Let's start a company. Now, this is 2 nerds talking to each other, right? We had to learn it from scratch. And a lot of people think Steve Jobs, it wasn't Steve Jobs at all. We had this idea a long time before Steve Jobs ever showed up. We went through 30 venture capital firms who all turned us down. We went through 15 large corporations who turned us down, one of which was General Motors, who almost didn't turn us down. We got very close to making a deal with H. Ross Perot, if you remember this character. He would have been worse than Steve Jobs. And finally, we got Steve to do it. Steve had been kicked out of Apple, and he came to us, Ed and me, and said, you know, I'd like to buy your company and run it. We said, no, we don't. We want to run it. We'll take your money, though. And he said, okay, and that's what happened. So you hear that Steve Jobs bought Pixar from Lucasfilm. No, he didn't. He funded a startup. And these are the startup. This is the issuing of the preferred A stock for him. Since he put in the money, we put in the technology. We paid Lucasfilm for the technology. And he sat on the board with Ed and me. The 3 of us were the board. And that was the beginnings of Pixar. I'm being told that I'm out of time, so I think maybe I'll just stop there. I had quite a few more things to show you, but all right. Let me just show you the 3 places where Steve did step in importantly for us. We wouldn't let him in the building just to show you how he ran the company. Okay, so he had nothing to do with the company or how it was run or what it did. But he did fund it, and he did well by us. The smartest thing he did was he took the company public when we had no money in the bank, just the promise of Toy Story, the first movie, being a hit. That was really brilliant. He became a billionaire overnight because of it. And then he was key in the negotiations for selling to Disney later for $7.4 billion. Remember, they could have had us for free in the beginning. Okay. Toy Story, of course, was that movie, the first movie. We finally got there. It's John Lasseter's brainchild, and I'll show you just a tiny bit. I'm sure most of you have seen it.
Okay, everybody, coast is clear. Boy, what are you looking at, you hockey puck? Hi, sorry, have you seen Slinky? Sir, no, sir. Okay, hey, thank you. That is. Hey, Slinky?
Right here, buddy. I'm ready this time.
No, Slink.
Oh, well, all right. You can be ready.
Not now, Slink. I got some bad news.
Bad news.
Just gather everyone up for a staff meeting and be happy.
Got it.
Be happy. Staff meeting, everybody. Snake, robot, podium. Hey, yes. Draw. Go. Got me again.
Okay, that's a Moore's Law test. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to show you a little bit more. This is Ratatouille, one of my favorite pieces. And the reason I'm showing you this is because Brad Bird did this, not John Lasseter. Brad Bird's the guy who did The Simpsons, and he was one of the first guys to ever come by and ask me to be in a movie with us. He was the funniest guy in the world I had ever met, still is. He's just naturally hilarious. But he didn't have a technical bone in his body when he first came to me at Lucasfilm. I knew that he couldn't sustain the harsh environment of the time, and I had to turn him down. So I was so tickled years later when the Moore's Law had brought us sufficient computing power, and the animators had worked with the programmers at Pixar to such an extent that the software now had very usable interfaces. So usable that a guy like Brad Bird, who still doesn't have a technical bone in his body, could make The Incredibles first and then Ratatouille. So here's a brief snippet of that.
Ratatouille? That must be joking.
All right, I could go on and on about the future of movies, but I think I'll stop now and come up and let you ask questions of me. For example, I've left out another startup that I did, and I could go on about the future of movies. Let me do that. Any questions brewing? Oh, come on. Oh, I can talk for 3 hours. You don't want me to get, I'm sure I love telling the stories because they're so good. There's really some delicious stories all along the way. Okay.
Where do you want to take us next?
Well, what's the future of animated movies, right? They're getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
So people are always saying, well, what comes next, Alvy? I mean, Moore's Law is still going, right? Factor of 10 every 5 years. It's revolutionary. So I, like you, cannot predict what it means to get another order of magnitude or 2 or 3. It just is going to feel so different. I do know that, you know what, we think these cell phones are so sexy now, they're going to look really crude in just 5 years probably. Just really crude. So what's going to be there that blows our minds then? I think it's going to be realistic human beings. I don't mean that we're going to replace the actors because we still don't have a clue how to replace acting or animation. By the way, actors and animators are the same talent. At Pixar, we hire animators by how well they act. It's one of those things that we haven't a clue how people do it. They can't tell you how they do it either, neither actors nor animators. So when I say realistic human beings on the screen, I mean avatars of human beings. It's already happened, actually. How many have seen A Curious Case of Benjamin Button? Stars Brad Pitt. There's a few scenes in there where Brad Pitt isn't Brad Pitt. But you don't know it, right? It's so good. So it's passed the Turing test, so to speak. It's just a shot or two because it's really hard to do, but I think there's going to be, so I think the next Holy Grail, the first Holy Grail was the first computer movie. That was Toy Story. The next one is the first, I'll call it the first digital live action movie. In other words, live action usually means close-up of emotional actors and so forth. But these will be, not a single one of them will be a photograph of a real human being. They'll all be avatars. They'll still be driven from behind by actors. They have to. We just don't know how to do that. Okay. Hi.
You may have just answered it, but I wonder if you might frame the future in terms of what is the single most greatest challenge right now that you're waiting for that next order of magnitude?
It's related. It's easy to say that we can drive an avatar with an actor, but how do you do it? How? What's the interface between a very sensitive, highly talented actor and a screen representation?
So is it
It's not going to be these dots on your face and the bodysuits and all that stuff. No self-respecting actor is going to put up with that more than once or twice, right? So there has to be something that does that interface, and it could require intelligence. I suspect it will, but not complete replacement. You know, we're enslaved by the intelligence. None of that singularity stuff, which I think is BS. Yes.
I was at Centigrade a few years ago, and the folks from it was in San Diego, so Hollywood folks were saying the salvation of the cinema is going to be 3D. I think we're going to see.
Now, their use of 3D is what I would call stereo, because it means, you know, two images, just like stereo sound. Because what you just watched is 3D. I mean, the databases for Ratatouille are completely embedded in three-dimensional space. So we already have 3D. Stereo, it's a nice gimmick, and it can work well. I've seen some stereo movies that I thought were quite effective. But I don't, the salvation is a good story, right? I mean, I don't get tired of watching movies just because I've seen a movie already. Okay.
Yeah, the Uncanny Valley Pro.
Oh, the uncanny. Is that you and me? I don't believe in the uncanny valley.
You think
No.
be a problem?
No, we were worried about that for years, that we'd get, in fact, Pixar very carefully stayed away from getting too close to a human being. We would either you'd have an animal that was human-like, or you have a monster that's human-like, or you cartoonized and just stayed away, because we humans are really sensitive about the look of other human beings. We have a word when it's not quite right. It's called monstrous, right? When you have a full on-screen face in a highly emotional scene, you don't want somebody going, something's wrong here, right? You can't have. Didn't turn out to be a problem. You just put enough reality into the model, and we go right by it. Brad Pitt, the non-Brad Pitt, in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, is a existence proof. Nobody spotted. I went in knowing there was a fake Brad Pitt in that movie, and I could not find it. I was looking right at it, right? So there's no uncanny valley. It still serves a purpose, the expression that you have to be careful when you get close to a human being and do it right, or, you know, we start from that age, wherever that little baby went, learning how what other humans look like and what they're probably thinking from just the slightest gestures. So you've got to have that right.
Thank you very much, Albie. I think that's all the questions we have time for this afternoon. Thank you, Albie.
Okay.
On behalf of Ann Bass, the Sons of Engineering University, for your attention and your
Thank you.